Hi, I'm Matthew Patrick Smyth, and welcome to my home. I have clients all over the world, and every project's different. Every client's different, every location is different. So I try to bring a uniqueness to each one. A lot of times it's where they are plays a big factor in how I design the space and what I find for them and how they live. I mean, that's the fun part of the process for me, is trying to figure out what's the best solution for this location and this environment. When I found my house, it was about 5 years ago, and it was a 1970s house. It wasn't something I was looking for, I just stumbled upon it. And what I was taken with was the sense of place, where it was located, the geography, the mountains, being in the woods. So when I started designing the house, I had to take that into consideration, what it was going to be like to live here for 4 seasons. When I meet with a new client and we're starting a new project, we really do start from the front door. The color of the house, the architecture outside the house, that all leads you into the house, and that's part of the process. That's the domino effect of design. I love working with architects and I love working with landscape designers. I love working with professionals in general. And also I believe that as an interior designer, you're sort of like a director in a movie. You're just bringing in all the sources. You have to bring the best people together, and you have to let them do what they do. Everything comes into consideration. You have to balance so many different elements when you're designing a home and take into account the location, the geography, the light, and every project's unique. I remember working on a project. I was in New York and the project was in San Francisco, and the colors in New York looked great. And then I got out to San Francisco and the light coming off the bay was so different. And I always encourage designers to travel and see what the world is like, because it influences everything you do. You start picking up subconsciously cultural trends and traditions that you can bring to every client into various projects. So I've spent a lot of time in Geneva or Paris or London or New York or upstate New York. I try to spend some time there and take in what makes that area so unique and how can I incorporate this into the home.
Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be able to address you today. My name is Ateli Iyala, and I'm the Managing Director of CDP North America. At CDP, our goal is to accelerate us towards a net zero, water secure, and deforestation-free world by mobilizing companies, governments, and the wider capital markets to take rapid environmental action. We run an annual disclosure process for companies, investors, and subnational governments, cities, states, and regions to disclose how they manage environmental issues. And then we share that data back to the marketplace to help influence decision-making and capital flows and general improvement from corporations. And also we work to help educate and build capacity of all of these critical stakeholders on these topics. With over 10,000 companies and governments, subnational governments as of last year, disclosing their environmental impact to us, CDP has been called the world's environmental report card, as it is and will continue to be indispensable to the global tracking, benchmarking, and acceleration of progress towards the goals of the Paris Agreement. But despite some encouraging progress over the last 6 years, the world is still not on track to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. And we're seeing the destructive impacts of climate change with our own eyes today. From devastating wildfires in Turkey and Western United States that seem to come every single year, to deadly floods in China, and another historic hurricane season on the East Coast, both in terms of damage to people and property. We are really feeling the climate crisis firsthand every day, and marginalized communities are also bearing the brunt of the immediate acute impacts of climate change. The latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change stresses that the time for action is now. In fact, it was yesterday. To stop the climate crisis and to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, decisive action is needed from all governments and businesses. And really, climate change is a problem that requires all hands on deck. Businesses have a crucial role to play in accelerating the transition to a green economy that works for people and planet. And that means all actors, big and small, in the global economy must step up, including architects, interior designers, product manufacturers, and others. When we talk about the climate crisis, many people normally think of the heaviest emitters, the oil and gas companies, shipping, airlines, and other heavy industries that are known to be responsible for significant levels of greenhouse gas emissions. But it's also important to highlight the vast carbon footprint of the built environment sector. Buildings and construction account for 39% of energy-related carbon dioxide emissions, according to the World Green Building Council. And science tells us that by 2030, we must cut global emissions in half to avoid the worst outcomes of climate change. And so that means to get on track for net zero carbon building stock by 2050, direct building CO2 emissions need to be reduced by 50% over the next 8 years. That's a significant challenge. And not only that, these emissions impacts are not just global in nature. And with climate change, it can seem sort of ephemeral and ethereal, the problem that we're talking about, but they have immediate local consequences, whether it's air quality, as well as in drastically impacting social equity within the United States and elsewhere. Specifically in the United States, African Americans are 75% more likely than others to live near facilities that produce hazardous waste. And so business has a moral imperative to do better. It's not just construction as well that is responsible for high emissions in the built environment sector. Life cycle assessments show that repeated renovations of spaces can mean that over the course of a building's life, interior renovations could have the biggest embodied carbon footprint, even more than the structure itself. And so interior designers have as much a role to play in greening the built environment as do constructions and materials companies, that are driving those low carbon materials and construction practices. Luckily, there is a clear roadmap to make change, and whether your sustainability journey is just beginning or has been underway for years. First of all, it starts with making mindful sourcing decisions, paying careful attention to creating a circular economy, in particular, designing for reuse and recycling. As we mentioned at the start, we have this new climate toolkit that's being launched, and that's exactly the type of thing that we need to be able to drive this. Don't underestimate the impact that you can have. You are part of a value chain that includes, yes, heavy, energy generation and materials. And as customers of these high emitting sectors, you do have power influence. And so looking into your selected materials carefully to minimize embodied carbon is really important. Being able to conduct a life cycle assessment of your products to understand the true impact on the environment. Secondly, even if you do not work for a corporation with a significant environmental impact or carbon footprint, your work impacts the wider value chain of the built environment sector. The more that all aspects of this value chain come together, architects, material designers, engaging with construction, product end of life, the more that we can enable large scale emissions reductions. And even your actions, even whether you have a high emissions profile or a low emissions profile, even your actions of setting your own ambitious reduction targets internally within your four walls, within your products, within your supply chain, can have a ripple effect across the market, cascading ambition up and down the value chain. Finally, I encourage you to embrace ingenuity. We are seeing leading companies in your sector innovate for the good of the environment, as well as for the future of their brands, from producing carbon negative carpet tiles to powering office buildings with renewable energy. There are cost savings and revenue growth opportunities on the table for companies big and small if they act on the low carbon transition. And to seize on these opportunities, you'll need to make the necessary investments into R&D that will lead to new products and services. And really at the moment, we are seeing a massive gap in investment in low carbon R&D. We know how we can address the low hanging fruit right away, which is things like switching away from fossil fuels, looking at the energy efficiency of existing buildings, switching to certain existing lower carbon materials. But more advanced action will be necessary after we run out of that low-hanging fruit and after we pass the 2030 milestone. And so it's important for us to invest in R&D now, creating new solutions so that we can reap the benefits in 7, 10, 20, 50 years from now. And CDP and other experts in this space are here to help. There is more data and expertise that exists out there than you can even imagine. And you'll hear some of that expertise in just a minute. And so your own knowledge and perspective can only help bolster the engagement, and set the stage for bold action. As I've mentioned, we know that a big part of the solution will be entire value chains coming together to tackle these unprecedented challenges at the scale and speed of business. And so we are here to partner with you on your sustainability journey, wherever and however we can. In the upcoming panel, you're going to hear the speakers dive deeper into some of the topics that I've just touched on a very high level on. But before I go, I'll leave you with this. Climate change is a massive and present danger. Yes, that's true, but it also presents an opportunity to innovate and fundamentally change how we live and work for the better. Architecture and design have the power to open up our minds to what our future could look like. You have a chance to inspire others through your work, not just within the built environment sector, but across the wider economy. And if done right, you can create spaces that motivate others to meet global sustainability goals. Consider how you can educate your clients, your tenants, your value chain, so they can use and reuse the spaces you create appropriately with limited environmental impact. Each of you in the audience is creative by nature, and so let the challenge of sustainability inspire us to build better spaces more responsibly, designing for the future we must shape for ourselves. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I look forward to hearing from the panelists. And again, thank you for having me.
Welcome to DesignTV. I'm Pam Jaccarino, Editor-in-Chief of Luxe Interiors and Design. Recently, I sat down with the Wizard of Wow, designer Ken Fulk, for a great conversation about his design philosophy, how to tell a great story through interiors, and much more. Enjoy the show. Hi, Ken.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to be with you today. Thanks for making the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Can you talk a little bit about, when you were a kid, how did you learn about dreaming big? Talk a little bit about those very early years for you and how that shaped you.
Though I did grow up sort of, I like to say, as kind of an alien. I came out this way. I am very much the same person I was when I was 6 years old. And I don't know the answer to the question really. It's just part of my DNA. I did always see the world in this sort of cinematic fashion. It's like, I don't know, it was almost like my own little superpower where I felt like we couldn't just have lunch. We needed to, I was okay. I had to climb on the step stool and get out the good dishes, and I had to go clip the flowers, and I was in charge of every holiday. And it wasn't that I thought I knew better or something. It was more like I wanted people to have the best experience possible. And to me, it was like giving them a gift. And it's like how we all get excited when we have a great birthday gift to give someone or a holiday gift. It's almost more exciting for us. And I felt that way about life and about all aspects of it, that I just was excited for people. I'm like, why would you do it this way when we could do it this way? And you'll have so much more fun. And I still believe that. And it's still the way that I see the world. And, if there is any sort of, it's a gift to me. And so I suppose as a gift, I like to share it and make it a gift for others.
It's baked into the Fulk DNA.
It is, and I don't know where I am truly. Certainly, I grew up in this kind of matriarchal society, and people entertained. They didn't really have decorators so much unless you were like really rich people. And even then you didn't talk about it. But I wasn't like anyone else. And they always thought I was sort of this funny little character who went and picked out my own jackets and bought my mother dresses. And it was,
Did you
I
feel
just went,
odd, Ken? Did you feel odd, like growing up and
no,
going
I
to
felt very
school?
self-possessed by it. I felt like it was a very natural thing for me. I didn't feel odd. I felt like I don't know whether I got some of it from watching TV reruns. Like I literally used to say that I wanted to, they would bring me out when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old and say, tell everyone where you're going to live when you grow up. And I would say, Manhattan. I hadn't left rural Virginia. And they would say, where? In this place called Manhattan. And I said, a penthouse. And, what I had it, my mother called them illusions of grandeur. And I think I still suffer from them. But if you're going to suffer from an ailment, I think illusions of grandeur isn't a bad one to have.
Yeah, make it fantastical and brilliant and wonderful. So your design business officially began when a friend asked you to lend a hand with decorating her home, and your business, sort of took off from there through, I'm sure, a lot of hard work and passion and your vision. How going from like that first job, I mean, you're such a risk taker. It seems like, from us looking in, and this world that you're running and that you built, do you feel like you took risks early on in your career, and especially early on? And if so, can you talk a little bit about that and some of the risks that you took?
I mean, I still think I probably take them every day. I was never trained as a designer, and I went to school in Virginia, and I think like every young person who didn't really know what they were going to do, thought I was supposed to go to law school just to maybe to delay the inevitable. And suddenly when I began this business, it was like a light bulb went off. And because I'd never seen it as a career, it was just sort of who I was. And it became like it was like the universe aligned. And I don't know that I fully recognized the quote unquote risk. I just was unorthodox how I probably ran my business compared to most people. I mean, I take the business part very seriously, but I sometimes equate it to somebody who maybe has a good voice or likes to sing, but doesn't want to take lessons for fear of losing the gift or something. And I was a little bit like that. I wanted to find my own path, and perhaps that was risky, but maybe I was too naive to know that it was risky. And then, I believe strongly, like, in the power of yes, which requires risk. We spend so much of our lives growing up, sort of being told no or learning what's right and wrong for us. And that's important to get boundaries. But at the same point, I almost feel like as we mature, we begin to shut down a little bit because we forget how to say yes. And for me, it is the most sort of exhilarating, intoxicating, scary thing that you can do. And that is to say yes to things that you might not even know if and how you can accomplish them. And I work with an amazing team of nearly 100 people who are like insane, talented folks. And believing that we can do anything, whether that's, we've created floral headdresses. It's gone down the haute couture runway of Dolce & Gabbana. I don't know anything about couture or frankly, even headdresses, but we did it. We've thrown elaborate weddings. I had never thrown a wedding before the first one, but I was confident that we could do it. And so that's the part I think that from the outside feels risky. But to me, it is, and it's almost combined with this sort of a thing inside me that is almost like a refusal to fail. And it's not like we don't have failures. I screw up every single day. I make mistakes constantly, and I'm, a very imperfect person. But it's that willingness to sort of take the crooked path to get you somewhere that on the outside looks like, overnight success. And instead, it's just the willingness to go on the journey that ultimately will get you across that finish line. So I think that's kind of how it all just came to be. And it still dictates everything we do today.
I had a question, which is kind of interesting, where it's like, what's the Ken Fulk playbook for when you hear the word no?
I think it depends on the circumstance. Sometimes, like if we're told no, that we're not getting a job, unless I really feel like, someone's making a mistake and I know that we're right, I will move on. I won't, because I feel like there are other doors that are opening. But I don't like to hear no within my own organization, unless, I really have to be convinced if someone's telling me, not that I don't want to hear an argument or understand. I don't think I have the best ideas in the room necessarily, but if I'm told no simply because things seem like they're too hard, or they've gotten no's themselves, what can be something as simple as, we're delivering a project to a client, and it's supposed to be delivered on August 24th. And I'm told that the upholsterer can't deliver the sofa, that the drapery workroom is backed up and the fabric's in Italy and it's not going to get here in time. I don't hear no. We will figure it out. I'm like, I don't care if we have to take burlap and line it with silk. We're going to hang drapes on those damn windows. Like, I will not take no. It will not be us dropping that ball. And so, it's again part of that crooked path where I won't, we just had this very instance happen where I'm like, well, then pick the sofa up, it will go somewhere else and we'll pay them. That sofa is going to be in the client's house. I'm not going to be the one that tells them no. And so I do have that sort of take no prisoners, do anything you need to
find
do
a solution. Find a
solution. And it may not be that exact thing that, but it's a solution. And so that's what I think success sort of looks like to some people, but it's just more about being a solution-based company.
You've summed up your design philosophy, Ken, in a sentence. I love this. Fear is the enemy of good design. Tell us how are you fearless, and how did you learn to become fearless? You're going to say that you were born fearless. I feel like it takes guts. Where does that courage come from? And how do you muster it, or particularly early? I feel like it's probably something that everyone always needs. You can't just go, okay, I've got the courage, but talk about being fearless.
It is the little Latin phrase on our first book, that fear is the enemy of good design. And I don't know that I'm truly fearless. I mean, I often I find it to be a motivator. Like when I'm worried about something, having a bit of fear is a good thing, because I find it to be a motivating thing. It makes me realize the pitfalls and to be present. And so I have a good dose of it all the time. But what I don't let it do is, sort of diminish what we do, because I'm afraid if someone's not going to like it, or someone's going to say something unkind, or because I think so often we get beige from fear, and who wants to live in that world? Like I say, if everybody likes something, it's not interesting, and it's probably not that good. And so, and it's not like I think everything we do is fantastic, but I won't be afraid to do it and afraid to make a mistake, because I know that we're smart enough to adapt. And so, certainly there's an amount of self-confidence. There's also an amount of feeling willing to just kind of go for it. And I don't know that it's fearlessness. It's just
You don't want to play it safe because
I
it's
don't
so boring.
like to play it safe. It just isn't why we're here on the planet. There's a Steve Jobs quote that says, if you're not going to make a dent in the universe, why are you here? And I feel obligated to do that. I do think, and this sounds almost cocky, and I mean it almost in the opposite way, but I think there's something like exceptional about my life and about the things we're here to do. And so I feel obligated. I feel like I've been given an opportunity, and why would I squander it? Like, then I feel like I would have been a really bad steward to my life, to my business. And so I feel a sense of obligation to whatever greater power, whatever has given me good fortune, I give myself pep talks. I talk to myself all the time, like where I say, be present, don't screw it up.
It's so interesting when you said that, like it's your obligation, because it reminds me of what you said about, a gift that you want to give. And it's for me, I just making a connection there to, this is your gift and you're putting it out there for all of us. So anyway, thank you. Okay, I've got so many more questions. I've got a whole list. I got a whole list. I have to talk to you about this. So you're a self-taught designer. You've gone with your gut. You've gone with the visions that you've had, and you view life through this incredible cinematic lens. And that there are these visual ideas that are in your head. You refer to them as your movies. Talk a little bit about your approach to design, Ken, and like the storytelling that underscores, I think, everything that you do. Explain what you mean to this team when you talk about storytelling and your movies.
So for some reason, I've always called our projects movies. We have a new book that's coming out next year called The Movie in My Mind, with my head sort of exploding with all of these ideas coming out of it. And I sort of had a realization as to maybe why. Part of it is because I don't possess any abilities I can't express myself through drawing. I don't use, I'm not an expert at CAD or computer. I was never trained in any of that. By the way, we now have a team where every single person is a highly trained expert in all of this, but I had none of those abilities. And the only way that I could express myself was through words. And early clients, there were no presentations. I literally walked them through spaces and I told them what would happen. And it made me a really good storyteller. Long before people ever talked about experiences and the experiential economy, I just sort of understood that. I knew what we were providing, because our clients, most of them are, benevolent billionaires who have and that's just sort of a weird fact. And they're really nice people, but they have a lot, and what they're interested in isn't about accumulation. Like luxury and having wealth has sort of been redefined, at least for my clients, and it becomes about imprinting memories. And we do that by facilitating those things to happen and setting the stage for it. And so we begin every project with words on paper. We literally start telling the story, and then we bring it to life. And we bring it elaborately to life through visuals and drawings and concepts. And even almost every house project we work on, we do branding and graphics, because we want to bring it to life, and not just in a, sort of a pretty room, but beyond that, what's going to happen in the room. So I do think it's what makes us a bit different than most creative firms out there and how we do things.
What do you think are the most important, qualities or the mindset for anybody to succeed, whatever they're doing, right? I mean, if you want to stand out and be the best and every field has, every field is crowded. But what are if you had to say like this is the ingredients. There's three things that like if you don't have this, it's just going to be really, you're always going to be sort of the back of the pack. What would you say those are?
The number one, I don't know about three, but certainly the number one for me is relationships. I think every job, no matter what, whether you're a salesperson, whether you work in accounting, whatever your role may be, it's ultimately about building relationships with people, I think, to be successful, because there are a million super talented designers out there who have incredible ideas and amazing vision. But I would be hard pressed to think that anyone could care more deeply about the relationships with the clients, with my team, than I do. And I take it super seriously, and I just genuinely care. Like, it's not, I think it's actually Frank Lloyd Wright of all things, but there's a quote that, not all my friends are clients, but all my clients are friends, because you have to care about people, and it has to be genuine. You can't be, if you're insincere or inauthentic, it shows. And so I think, to me, that is the number one key to becoming successful in any field, is being good and truly caring about relationships and people. And, I think so often you think, oh, you have to be ruthless, or you have to be, sort of, and I think it's the opposite. I think you have to be good and kind and care and genuinely do that. And then the rest sort of happens if you actually have the goods to do it, if you are talented in whatever field that may be.
What are the ingredients of a good story in your mind?
For me, it's usually, and I guess there could be a day that I wake up and they don't pop into my head, but for me, I'm like a sponge with it and just absorb them. There definitely needs to be, it's like a basic character plot where you want to have sort of, an opening, the sort of crescendo, and a finale. I love a good finale. And, we do think about it in that way, where in the book we're doing, that we see them as, there's like action thrillers and romantic comedies. And so I think thinking about, you want to grab people's attention to begin with, to get them excited and engaged. And then, you need some intrigue. And then you need the big ta-da.
The showgirls that come in dancing on a cake.
You definitely need, who doesn't want showgirls coming in? And so for me, that's key to good storytelling. As far as inspirations, I pull them weirdly from early childhood memories to a movie I saw last week, to, a floor I walked on in India and thought it was cool. And, I'm not the world's, like, some people are such great students, and, they have so much information in them. And I feel like more like life's a smorgasbord, and I sort of pull little pieces from it. And it's like, if you know how to cook, I don't need the cookbook. I'm just going to go in the kitchen. I'm going to grab some things out of the pantry and the fridge, and I sort of put it together, and I keep tasting it until we get it right.
So we have a lot of folks listening in who are in sales and marketing and catering to clients. I think you talk about the relationship being the most important thing, but how do they, I was going to ask you, because I feel like you're great at the relationship, but also like the Ken Fulk razzle dazzle, like nobody does it better. How do they close deals? What can they do beyond the relationship? They're closing a deal. Give them a few one Ken Fulk good, like, kind of ingredient to help close a deal beyond the fact that they have to have a great relationship with their clients.
Sure. I mean, I always try, we like to say, to delight and surprise. And so, it's fun to sort of take people's breath away. We try to think of those things that are creative, unexpected, whether it's, sending the perfect or funny, ridiculous gift. I have a very long-term client now who I was at the opening of the opera, and I was wearing some crazy Lanvin big bow tie, and he commented on it. And this guy is never going to wear a bow tie, but I sent him one beautifully wrapped, and I said, everybody needs a big one. And he was like, sort of, I'm sure, taken back but funny. And we built a relationship on just like, something slightly ridiculous. I also think, being willing to do things that don't always seem like it's transactional. Because I think, especially in sales and marketing, because it is a transactional by nature, that when you do things where there may not be something in it for you whatsoever, but you're just doing it because it's about building that relationship. So we often do that. We keep track of almost, all of our friends and colleagues' birthdays. I make sure I do something for them, and they're sort of like, how do you remember my birthday? And this is someone that they just stay on our list, and to do something nice for them, to make them feel recognized. And then sometimes we literally do send in a troupe of dancers. No joke. And I think thinking of those things and not always looking at the end result of getting the deal signed, but looking at the long game.
Ken Fulk, what is your favorite word?
Yes.
What is your least favorite word?
Maybe.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Dogs.
I knew you were going to say your dogs. Everybody, if you're not following Ken on Instagram, you must see his dog.
No one follows the design. They just follow my dogs.
That's
why they don't have their own channel.
When they're in P-Town and they jump in the water, I just am like, I've got little Shih Tzus. They don't love the ocean, but yeah. So anyway, what turns you off, Ken?
Mean people.
What is your favorite curse word?
Well, I have a last name, Fulk, and so it is so close to. Excuse my language. My mother may be watching. She's not. But we have a lot of fun with it. So it's hard not to be my favorite curse word.
What sound or noise do you love, Ken?
It goes back to my dogs. If you watch any of these videos, they sound like little snorting pigs when they come out of the water. And I love that sound.
No.
It brings me joy. We do that like twice a day, by the way. If you see those videos, it seems like I post them a lot, but it's a big part of our lives. And any time of the year, whether it's in a pool or in the, it brings me great joy.
I get it. I am the mother of 2 dogs and 2 human boys, but the dogs, we're all about the dogs. Yeah, seriously. I tell my kids, you kids are nice, but it's all about the dogs. What sound or noise do you dislike?
Nails on the chalkboard.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Movie making.
I feel like there's going to be a movie. There's going to be like a Ken Fulk. I just want to say one thing about this. I think you must go down the Quentin Tarantino route if you're going to do a movie. So Quentin Tarantino does not believe in a small screen Netflix, even though they are, that's the new way. I think we're going to do a Ken Fulk movie, or you're going to do a Ken Fulk movie. It's got to be on the cinematic big screen.
Giant.
Big screen. You cannot watch it on your phone.
No.
You cannot watch it on your TV at home unless you have a big one. That's all I'm going to say, a big TV. Okay. What profession would you not like to do, Ken?
I would not like to sit in an office all day.
One last question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome home.
Because you love the cinema and just the visual, are there any do you have like your favorite movie directors, past or present, or if you had to live on an island and you just take a few great films with you, you're gonna have a big screen, right? We're gonna go Tarantino. What are you gonna watch?
I remember films so vividly from my childhood that had a big impact on me. I sort of grew up around, these blockbuster movies of the E.T. and I must have paid to see Grease how many times, the idea of I knew every song by heart. But I do remember being really little, and this is a funny film because it kind of didn't get great reviews when it came out. And it was Gene Kelly directed Hello, Dolly. And it starred Barbara Streisand. And I think it literally came out when I was was I born? I don't know. But I remember being mesmerized by it. And even to this day, that sort of Harmonia Gardens restaurant scene of her coming down the stairs and the feathered headdress and Louis Armstrong and the dancing waiters. And if I had to encapsulate something that sort of was my idea of what dinner out in New York was supposed to look like, that was it. And so we just screened it. I did in Provincetown. We opened an outpost of the St. Joseph's Arts Foundation in an old sea captain's house called the Provincetown Art Society that really is meant to be in service to the town and to the organizations there. And the amazing artisan who helped with the house built a huge movie screen. And so in the back courtyard, we show movies under the stars to help raise money for the Film Society that sort of had a hard time through the pandemic, like so many places. And we just showed Hello, Dolly, which made me very happy.
That's wonderful. There's another great movie. It's called That's Entertainment. And it's
Yes.
I don't know. I should read up Bugsby, Berkeley, or what, just those.
It is. It's sort of that Ziegfeld-esque.
Oh yeah, they just went for it. So maybe I'm going to watch that this weekend. You've inspired me. But Ken, thank you so much for doing what you do and inspiring all of us, and for the gift of your time that you've given to all of us today. Truly, we really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, thank you all for having me. I am a fortunate man, and I'm glad that you were interested in hearing from me. So thank you.
I'm Helene Upperman, Managing Director of Interior Design Magazine, and I'd like to welcome you. So, have you ever thought about the carbon footprint of the building you're living in, working in, designing for your client? The very makeup of that building, the materials that comprise both the infrastructure and the interior design are all emitting carbon dioxide that is ultimately affecting climate change and the very health of our planet. These emissions, or embodied carbon, is a challenge that the design industry must take up and tackle in the here and now. The mission to eliminate embodied carbon from within our buildings, and the first step can begin with the specification of a single material. With me today to provide insight on the impact of embodied carbon on our environment and to impart a roadmap to make smarter, healthier, more sustainable design choices are Mike Johnson, Director of Sustainability for 3Form Companies, Jane Hallinan, Associate at Perkins Eastman, and Alex Muller, Director of Collaborative Impact at Mindful Materials. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you.
Hey. Thanks.
Okay. So Mike, I'm going to start with you. And I think we should start in maybe the simplest terms that like we all understand, including myself. But really, what is embodied carbon and what is the impact it has on the built environment around us?
Yeah, a really great question to start with. So I'm going to try to put in really basic terms and then an analogy that we can all understand, because most of us drive an automobile or use one at some point. So even the best automobile out there, even the most fuel efficient, has a huge, huge life behind it before it ever hits the lot or ever gets a driver behind that wheel. And that life is the creation of things like steel and the plastic and all the parts that go in to create that car. All the way along the way, we have to burn typically fossil fuels to create those items and then to ship them around and then to assemble them to finally get that finished car at 0 mileage to the lot where you or I or anybody else can buy it and then operate it. So that's the embodied carbon. By the time it gets there, it's already got a lifetime of emitting carbon dioxide equivalent gases to the atmosphere, which are contributing to climate change, as you said. And then we have the operational energy, which is when you fill that car up with gas or diesel or even electricity. Even Teslas are going to have a footprint depending upon where that electricity is coming from. And that's going to be the operational versus the embodied. And embodied really represents a massive opportunity for our industry, because roughly 11% of all climate changing gases every single year and globe-wide are emitted as a result of manufacturing building materials. So together in this industry, we have the power today, not tomorrow, not 10 years from now, but today, to actually really start making a tremendous impact by choosing very carefully the materials that will last the longest and also reduce the embodied carbon of our projects. So I hope that gives kind of a good overview.
I definitely think so. But I'm really curious, like, why should the conversation be centered on carbon specifically and climate change? You know, there's a lot of conversations about health and well-being. I mean, are we discounting human health and social equity by doing that?
Really one of my favorite questions, and one that I have debated with my colleagues for a very long time. I'm going to start answering that question by telling you that I just saw literally 10 minutes before our conversation, 7 to 11-year-old Girl Scouts from, of all places, the Wisconsin Badgerland Council. I mean, it couldn't get any better. And these 7 to 11-year-olds put together their own video on embodied carbon of building materials. And they were talking about environmental product declarations and all this stuff. And it was so cute. It just made my entire day. But I say that not only tongue in cheek, but really it means that we are looking out for the future of our human species in terms of health and everything else that we need to look out for when we are looking at for embodied carbon. And I say that because when we are as a world facing a climate that may not be survivable, quite literally, if we don't get a grasp on this, then the material health of ingredients, they're not going to matter for very long to us. We need to make sure that we first and foremost address the most existential crisis of our time. At the same time, this is really the silver lining is, usually when manufacturers are looking at reducing their embodied carbon, they're also looking out for social equity. They're also looking out for human health, because we know we really have to accomplish all of the platform of sustainability to make sure that 8 billion people on this planet can survive and live a healthy life. So they all go hand in hand. In my opinion, embodied carbon has to take first position because of the impacts on everything else that we're facing right now.
Well, first off, I feel like, is there an embodied carbon badge that we now have to make sure Girl Scouts get? But switching gears, you know, Jane, I want to speak to you, and, from your perspective as an interior designer, why should embodied carbon impact the design choices we make?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was some recent research conducted by the Carbon Leadership Forum that actually indicates that interior designers may be responsible for emissions at least equal to those associated with the structure and the envelope of the building, which is where in the A&D realm, a lot of emphasis around carbon usually focuses on. And obviously interior designers, we specify a lot of stuff. And all of those items and materials that we specify have a lot of embodied carbon obviously built up into that. But this is really a phenomenal opportunity for interior designers to be a leader in this aspect and to drive the demand to focus on embodied carbon in our projects and in the products that we're specifying. It's really no longer a case of taking too much time necessarily to find or specify products. An example of that is our new Perkins Eastman Pittsburgh office, where I'm reporting from today, which achieved 34% embodied carbon reduction compared to similar sized tenant fit out renovations. So it's really our opportunity as interior designers to really kind of take charge of this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, Alex, switching it to you, because of the lack of information and really tools given to interior designers, I think as they really start their careers and enter the field, I think this is really where you come in and why Mindful Materials was created. So how has your background and experience led you to this sort of intersection between design and manufacturing?
Yeah. And that's something that I really like to talk about a lot, is that interface, because I think sometimes there isn't enough focus on that kind of communication and collaboration. My work in this industry began a little bit by accident. I was interested in supporting a Living Building Challenge project at Purdue University. And so I was vetting materials and material ingredients and kind of navigating blindly at the time. I felt really lost and didn't know where to start. I think in 2014, there was a lot less information out there, a lot less adoption around transparency and really optimization of materials around different aspects of sustainability. Beyond that, my work took me to the International Living Future Institute, where I was working on developing and evolving certification programs like the Living Product Challenge and Declare. And I was working with manufacturers to inspire them to lead on sustainability, but also provide robust tools for designers and owners to be able to identify better products. So that work taught me a ton about life cycle assessment and red list and carbon and everything like that. But I think what it really instilled in me was the critical importance of, I think, first communication. So fostering communication between folks like Mike, right, who are supplying the materials, and people like Jane who are asking for those materials, and making sure that they're sort of speaking the same language and there are tools and places that they can connect. I think it also taught me about the importance of both individual and collective action. I think maybe we can talk about that more a little bit later, but how do we start to build, movements and signals of demand and supply around things like carbon? I think that's critical to really inspire action. And then collaboration, really. And coming back to that, how do we start to build this common understanding around what embodied carbon is, why is it important, and how can manufacturers really meet the demand that designers are asking for, and also make sure that when designers actually use those products based on sustainability information, that the information gets back to the manufacturer. And so those feedback loops are really critical. And so Mindful Materials, is many things, but it's a library of products that meet transparency and optimization requirements for sustainability, and one of those factors really being the critical importance of carbon. And so what Mindful Materials does is provide this sort of baseline of entry, kind of acts as a bouncer for materials to say, do you have documentation that proves that you've begun your journey towards material sustainability? And I'm really excited about growing that to make that a tool so that nobody has to start where I did, having no idea where to begin, having to design your own standards and set your own standards for materials. And so I'm really interested in how we get everyone to kind of have this common understanding and start together.
Well, of course, Alex, you couldn't exist without first having some products or materials to actually advise on. And so I know that 3form and other manufacturers as well really have taken to heart the fact that there is a lack of sustainable materials out on the market, and really addressing this need by launching new products. And Mike, it just so happens that you guys have a new introduction that really taps into this. So do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I just thought it was funny because I was thinking about the cart and the horse problem, and I was wondering if that's the horse in this situation here. That's okay, whatever you'd like to call. Yeah, so I want to reiterate one thing that's really important to understand also, Helene, about what Jane said and what Alex has alluded to. If we're not looking at this as a design community and manufacturing community and taking to heart the actual embodied versus operational life of a building, and Jane mentioned that about half can come from embodied carbon. Well, that's only if those embodied carbon materials stay in place. So if we get in this habit, like we do with our clothing, of fast fashion for interiors, wow, we have suddenly taken that half and we multiplied it by 4. And now we're in a much more dire situation. So when we talk about introducing materials that are responsible, like we have been doing, we can't just stop at recycled content. We can't just stop at material health. We've got to be looking at material circularity. We need to recognize that at the end of life, these are going to go somewhere. So can they be taken back? Can they be disassembled? Can they go back into something new? Can they be refurbished, donated? We as manufacturers really have to think that way. I'm fortunate to now work for a company that really began the journey far before I ever came on board. I can't take credit for nearly everything that's been done. The journey started in 2003 with a high recycled material as the flagship product. Fast forward to today, you might have seen the email announcements. We actually have 100% Fleck product on the market as of today, which is really exciting because it's not just recycled. It's what I'm saying about material circularity. It took us 10 years as a concerted manufacturer to finally figure out how to pull our own formerly known as waste material back into our process to create really beautiful new items that are going to perform in the marketplace, but also be desired and want to be in that space, so it doesn't get torn out in 3 to 4 years. So it's a long journey, it's a hard journey, but it's also a really worthwhile journey, and one that I think all manufacturers must feel the responsibility to take on right now.
So, going back to this, what you were saying about the circularity of materials and sort of the life cycle. So what does someone want to do? So if they are renovating and unfortunately they do have to take out materials, what do you suggest, or what does 3form have in place in terms of the life cycle of these materials that are being removed from buildings?
Talk about hitting the nail on the head. So there's a double-edged problem, right? I mean, manufacturers like 3form companies can set out to take back our materials, and we can design with that intent. We can put the programs in place. But let's be honest, all of us in this room know, and all of our listening audience knows, that very rarely is a demolition contractor going to go in there and very carefully disassemble each and every piece, wrap it up, find out where it goes, and then ship it back and get a chain of custody to back all of that up. So, we're faced with a situation where manufacturers who genuinely do care need to take it upon themselves to first and foremost have that in place. Then we need to go out as a manufacturer and educate our clients that take-back programs are not only important, but that they can get credit through LEED or the Living Building Challenge or other places for extended producer responsibility. And then we need to take it further when we can and encourage local communities and local governments, and maybe at some point the federal government, to start putting in place requirements for recycling, like Portland has, and New York City has, and Vancouver, British Columbia. We're starting to see that pop up, and we're seeing firms like Jane's firm really come together to make this demand happen. But it's got to come from every single angle. It can't just come from manufacturers, because we can do everything right, but if nobody returns our panels to us or our samples to us, we've got a great program where it's like having a great movie that nobody sees. It doesn't do any good.
Well, that's really a great sort of segue into sort of what we should be talking about next for Jane, because we all understand the impact we're having on the world around us. And I think we all understand and think about what we can do both as an individual and as an industry, because I think that's important. Like we collectively, Alex says it, it's about collaboration and communication. So how can we, together create a better, healthier planet? And so Jane, as an interior designer, how can you be part of the solution?
Absolutely. So I'd like to highlight 3 different ways that we can, as interior designers, through various relationships, really contribute to that. So first and foremost, thinking individually what you as an interior designer can do, where it really starts is by purposefully prioritizing. You have that power. You're selecting these materials. You can decide what options you want to consider, what options you want to show to your client. You have the opportunity during construction to not allow regrettable substitutions that are being placed into the project, maybe because your original specification has a long lead time or has been discontinued. So not allowing some of these products that might be cheaper, faster, but might not be healthier from an environmental or human health standpoint. And then, of course, advocating for reuse as much as possible. So then the second way is through you as an individual at your firm. So for example, Perkins Eastman has started various initiatives such as creating a matrix for vetting products that contribute to human and environmental health. As a firm or as an individual in your firm, you can encourage signing the AIA Materials Pledge. Perkins Eastman has also signed or contributed to a letter to the Biden administration for Build Back Better, which we're extremely proud to be part of. And we feel that all of these things are responsibilities that we owe to our client and to the communities that we're serving. And then finally, as an individual, your relationship with manufacturers, obviously part of the core conversation here today. As a designer, really kind of alluding back to what Alex had mentioned, that feedback loop, designers really need to let manufacturers know that we value, we're prioritizing these products. And another way that we are thinking about doing this, especially here at Perkins Eastman, is thinking about what materials we place on our material library shelves. So only placing books, obviously the real estate of product libraries are decreasing substantially, but of the shelving space that you do have, allowing for the best in sustainability and human health products that these manufacturers are producing.
Well, one comment I do want to make is that at NeoCon this year, I believe IIDA and ASID are also signing a pledge, which is great. So they'll be joining the AIA in that. But, Alex, maybe we can turn it to you, because what should designers really be looking at when they are specifying materials? I think there's a lot of notion of greenwashing, or just not even that. I think there's just a lot of information. And how do they sort of, find those real identifiable facts when it comes to embodied carbon and the materials that they should be specifying?
Yeah, it's a good question. And greenwashing is real, right? It happens every day. We see it at the supermarket or when we're shopping for anything, let alone building products. I think one really critical place to start is really to look for third-party certifications, labels, and standards, right? So not necessarily a manufacturer created standard for how they're meeting these things. It really helps to have somebody adhering to external standards, particularly ones where there's additionally sort of a third party that is verifying or certifying that information. And it's important to ask for those things, and it's important to recognize all of the work and investment in terms of research, time, and financial investment that goes into that by manufacturers. And thinking about when they do that, it is an opportunity to reward that, to give that feedback by using that product and communicating why you did or did not use a product to manufacturers. I've had manufacturers say to me before, I'd rather know the reason that you didn't specify my product than to not know the reason that you did. You know, it's a little bit, I'm sure everybody wants their product to be used on a project, but that feedback is really critical. So looking for those third-party standards. And so there we're talking about not just environmental product declarations, right, which are looking at the life cycle impacts, including carbon of a product, but products that go beyond that to have optimized EPDs is a great thing to look for, because then they just haven't created the documentation. They've actually gone beyond to optimize or improve their footprint. There are also certifications out there, like, for example, the highest levels of cradle to cradle, which many people will be familiar with. Additionally, the Living Product Challenge certification requires that manufacturers assess their footprint in multiple areas, work to reduce that, and then at the highest level of certification, actually become net positive or work to create more positive impact than what is required by their footprint, right? And their footprint is sort of the same thing as saying like the embodied impacts. So those are a few examples that are out there. And once again, I would say, look for those things. If you don't see them, ask for them, right? Your ask is so critical and so powerful. And I like how Jane keeps talking about this as an opportunity, because it can be overwhelming. I get overwhelmed by materials and researching this stuff and everything. Start to ask the questions. Ask the questions at your firm, at your manufacturing company. What are we doing around this? Why are we doing it that way? And then once again, if you find products that meet that, once again, yeah, prioritize them on your shelves. That's why Mindful Materials was created. It was created originally as a physical label for architecture libraries to essentially only let in products that meet that kind of minimum level of sustainability. And so, you know, create those entry criteria around these common frameworks, use those products, and then finally provide that feedback to manufacturers.
I mean, so what I'm really hearing is like, it all comes down to communication, but I think it still can be completely overwhelming for a designer. And you really have some great advice on how an individual designer, maybe newer designer to this, about how they can take an action. And you're saying it's as simple as one little baby step, right?
Exactly. And because there are so many different certifications and criteria, and what applies to flooring doesn't necessarily apply to coatings or to fabrics, it can really become overwhelming as to how do you manage and understand and learn all of these. And so I really encourage designers to literally start with one product. You can start with one line of your finish schedule, of your specifications on just one product in particular, or one product type, thinking about all carpeting or resilient, or even just all flooring. Focusing on these smaller categories helps you build over time and get better with practice. This idea of kind of having this perfect gold star is what we're obviously achieving, but because the industry is catching up with sustainable and healthy products, we're slowly getting better and better every time we work on a project. So that's really one way that you can, as a designer, really start to kind of focus on this. But another thing that I'd like to mention, not just in specifying product, but also supporting policy. Mike mentioned this earlier, and I love policy. I think that it is so important. It can be also very overwhelming, but understanding that it's going to be a blend of both government initiatives and grassroots efforts that are going to get us towards a healthier future. And then, of course, to top it all off, it doesn't get any better than specifying local, with local makers, with your local community, and looking for different ways to incorporate a local woodworker or a local ceramicist into your designs. Really creates just a special and unique opportunity for your projects.
So Jane, I actually want to continue sort of along the same line. So like, that's what you do as a designer. But, of course, we're the one person we may not be including in this conversation is like the end user and the client, right? And like, how do you educate them to make the better choices and to ultimately get them on board with specifying some of those sustainable products?
Yeah, where we like to start this conversation is with our client sustainability goals and their mission statements. And we really use that as a starting point. And then our projects, we're really advocating that every project, big, small, wherever in between, also has a sustainability goal or initiative. And then those are ways that we look to blend together. A good friend of mine recently told me that we have to think about focusing on designing for the outcome and not necessarily as focused on the individual parts per million, that we have to think about these overall goals, both how we work with, how we support our clients' goals and how we can kind of embody the design goals of the project and to create these kind of married goals together between clients and design projects.
So Alex, from your perspective at Mindful Materials, like what issues do you think like designers are really bumping up against in their day-to-day when working on projects?
If you think about what you're doing right now as your business as usual, your status quo, that's what would continue otherwise. Any change that you make to improve that puts us in a better position. And so I think, think about it as an opportunity and think about starting small and just sort of trying to get a handle around it. Identifying places where there's no cost difference to sort of switch something out, or whether it feels like a really, critical area of the design for the client. I think, Jane also talking about communication and understanding what is important to the client and what's really sort of built into their strategy and communicating around those terms. And certainly, I think that having sustainability as this like add-on, as this other thing that you have to look into can be difficult. And so obviously I would advocate for firms, and designers individually to really bake sustainability, of course, into what they're doing, starting in small ways, of course. But I think that where we have to really get to is that sustainable design needs to become synonymous with good design. And it's not this like thing that you do at the end, is that it needs to be, considered the baseline of practice to consider these things. And yeah, I think communication and conversations with clients are really critical. And then just in terms of education and finding products, I think that's another area. So I think, webinars like this are a great place to start to sort of learn the basics. And I think that finding products can sometimes be this barrier, especially a perceived barrier, but there are more and more tools, obviously, like Mindful Materials, but it's not just in Mindful Materials. I mean, the cool thing is that we are connecting our sort of framework of sustainability to tools like Material Bank, for example, right? And so our goal is to sort of connect to the places where you're also doing your best work and just bring that sustainability framework into it so that it's not this add-on.
So Alex, sort of continuing that, so, that's great. I think speaking sort of from the perspective of like the designers you work with, but, is there any advice that you would have for manufacturers or, just in terms of what's missing in the market, or maybe it's more about how they can make it easier for both you at Mindful Materials and the designers to specify materials?
Yeah, I think what's missing in the market is more, and that's what I enjoy about working at Mindful Materials, is that I'm like, I don't care what you do in some ways, as long as it meets this baseline of sustainability and you start to take action. I want to see more manufacturers taking action and starting to identify ways to create impact around carbon and material sustainability.
Well, Mike, I don't want to leave you out of the entire conversation, but I as a manufacturer, like, is there anything that, and also in your role as Director of Sustainability, is there anything both from a perspective of 3form and maybe even advice to your own manufacturing peers of what you should be looking forward towards the future, and what is the next step in your mission to make this sort of a better, healthier world?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to begin by underscoring a few things that were said, but adding something that we didn't state overtly, which has to be understood. Everything that we're talking about today is 100% voluntary by manufacturers, 100% voluntary by firms like Jane's firm and designers. There are no laws or regulations requiring anything to get better, essentially. And that, as Jane mentioned about policy, that's kind of a dangerous position, but it's also a really powerful position because we don't have to wait. We don't have to follow rules. We can exceed our wildest expectations at making building materials better, perform better, last longer, be able to be taken back, have biophilia included in their design. There are so many things that we have complete control over. So that's the beauty of the marketplace. The flip side is that freedom comes with a cost. There is no regulation. So when a manufacturer, whether it's 3form companies or anybody else out there, has any of these documents whatsoever, especially those that are third-party verified, that means they put in a lot of money. They're not just talking, they're also walking the talk, they're spending their money. And when they produce an optimized EPD or a living product challenge certified product, or a gold or platinum level cradle to cradle, or again, going back to the small steps that we're talking about, even if the local manufacturer that Jane is talking about makes a wild attempt at filling out a health product declaration or declare label, those are steps, they're meaningful. It means they're taking real action. So to the manufacturers that aren't doing anything yet, get on board. It's time. No more time left to mess around. You have no more excuses. Health product declarations are far from free because they take a lot of time to research and report. But the platform itself is free. Declare labels are very affordable. If you can't do those, get a social equity program together and start getting involved in your local community. Do something. That's kind of the underlying message. And before we leave the conversation any further, I want to remind everybody something that I found very disturbing, and that is around the world, the IPCC report and most of us on the news, we talk in terms of degrees Celsius of global heating. And that's a real problem for most people in North America, which is where we have the largest impact in the world from a climate standpoint, because we don't think in Celsius, we don't think in centigrade, we think in Fahrenheit. So I don't want to go too far down the track, but I want to give everybody a little bit of context, especially the manufacturers that aren't doing anything or anybody who's not doing anything. If we hit 1.5 degrees Celsius warming by 2050, which is projected to be more than likely if we don't dramatically change our ways, that means that the coldest nights in the Arctic are going to be 8 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. That's the coldest nights in the Arctic. That spells disaster for ice and sea levels and rain patterns and everything that we depend upon on this planet. Stepping off the soapbox now a little bit, I just need to make sure that we all truly, genuinely embrace what we're facing as an opportunity to make real world change right now. Every product that you manufacture should have a path to being better. And if it doesn't, you probably shouldn't be producing it at all.
Well, thank you, Mike. Well, it's really interesting because I think during those conversations, two phrases really came to mind, which is education starts at home, and on this webinar, and practice what you preach. And I think both are incredibly relevant, as it's important for any of us, both as an individual, but also as an organization, of course, whether it's 3form or Perkins Eastman or Mindful Materials or SANDOW or anyone else out there, really to have our own actions really match up with our beliefs before we try to encourage the outside world to do the same. And I think it's important for all of us, if we haven't learned from this conversation today, that we need to start making positive changes where we live, where we work, where we play, so that because all of that makes a real impact on the world around us. And like to Mike's point, it starts today. It needs to start now. So the moment you get off of this webinar, I want you all our wonderful audience out there to obviously do some research of your own and look into sort of the work that Perkins Eastman's doing, the work that Mindful Materials is, and some of the materials that 3form is doing, and everything else that is out there. But I want to say to all three of you, thank you so much for your time, your insight. I realize this is just scratching the surface and we could talk for a lot longer on this topic, but thank you so much for everything that you're all doing. And of course, I look forward to everything that you're going to be doing in the future. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Smyth with Luxe Interiors and Design. Welcome to In the Kitchen with AJ Madison, featuring Monogram. I'm here with Jessica Petrino, Editorial Director of Nationwide Appliance Authority, AJ Madison. Jess, thank you for being here. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Good. Well, it's starting to get a little cooler here in South Florida. Summer's starting to end and we're going into fall. So I'm starting to think about my fall routine, and I'm realizing we have all these gatherings coming up, right? We've got the holidays, football season, Sunday family dinners. So I'm realizing now is probably a really good time to take a look around the kitchen and do any touch-ups, right? Don't you think people should be thinking about that right now?
Oh, for sure. Like, this is the best time of year. This is the time of year where our calendars get stacked with all kinds of, things to do and things to look forward to, intimate moments with family. And it's also, in my opinion, the best eating season of the year. Like football season, fantastic. Like Thanksgiving, my favorite holiday. So this is a fantastic time to look forward to. And it's also a really nice time to consider what you have in your kitchen and potentially what you could have in your kitchen with what's available today. From being in this industry, this is the perfect time. If you're thinking about either renovating or replacing a couple of your appliances, it is a great time to start looking, especially because if you can get your appliances early, you can start using them before the holidays, before those big gatherings. And you can be an expert with all of your new cooking tools. And I'm really excited to be here talking about Monogram. Monogram really is a brand that's going to bring so much joy and excitement to cooking at home. They have such an incredible selection of products, and I'm really excited to talk about them today.
Oh, I bet. Well, and it's a good point what you said about kind of getting that practice run in before the big show, before Thanksgiving dinner and everything else we have going on. So one of the largest appliances that really tends to be a focal point of the kitchen is the range. And there's that big decision. Do I get gas? Do I get electric? And I feel like it comes down to the burners and sort of personal preferences with cooking, right? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
So sure. I mean, in the past, when people were deciding whether they were going to go with gas or electric or even induction, which is a magnet-driven electric cooking surface, the great thing about the Monogram collection in particular is that they really offer something for everyone. At AJ Madison, we carry a massive selection of brands and products, and we're always so impressed by what Monogram has to offer. And in particular, their new Statement Series ranges are show-stopping. They're really quite phenomenal. For folks that really like precision, they are the first range manufacturer to offer a partnership with Heston Q that can deliver an exact temperature on a gas burner, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
In the past, people had to go full electric to be able to get precision, but this gas burner can get down to the temperature, which is really special. Furthermore, there's a couple of things about this range series that are just really special. The range grates themselves are actually reversible. So you can cook with a flat pan or pot on one side, but if you flip it over, you can actually effectively cook with a round bottomed wok pan.
Oh, wow.
So it's just adding that extra versatility, and that's available on every burner on their gas ranges. I also love, like, for folks that aren't huge into cooking, the Chef Connect feature is really, really special because you can synchronize things throughout your kitchen, and it can control the timers for you. And especially around the holidays, if you're cooking multiple things concurrently, it can really help you make sure that you time things correctly. Everything comes out warm at the same time. And then you just have a more seamless experience in the kitchen. And so I'm really excited to share that and many other details about some of their new Statement Series ranges.
Yeah, it's kind of like the best of both worlds. Or I think about it like cars. You can have manual or you can have stick shift. And in this case, it's kind of combining both, which really is, especially if you have two different types of chefs in your house. So one who prefers one way and one who prefers another. But I know that in my house, the chef of our household really is my husband, not so much me. I prefer very easy recipes. I prefer easy to use appliances. And something that has really kind of been sweeping the nation lately is the air fryer, which is one of my favorite things. It's easy to use. You can toss so many things in there. It cooks on its own. And they're just getting so popular these days.
So it's really exciting to see the air fry technology making its way into ranges and ovens. The Monogram brand in particular incorporates this technology into a lot of their products. And so what an air fryer does is it delivers that crispy texture and like that fried flavor that we all love and crave, but with like 80% less guilt. Right. So you're not immersing your food into oil. You're not using butter. You're essentially using a really powerful convection fan mode that delivers that texture that you want without the guilt. So it's really awesome. And the fact that this technology can be incorporated into ovens means that ultimately you save counter space because you're not investing in another countertop appliance to go on your counter. If you have a stove with that mode built into it, it just makes your appliances more versatile and more multifunctional. So it's really, really kind of an exciting innovation and comes in handy, especially with all of this like tailgate and, you know, the sports games coming up in the fall with football and having all those appetizers. Plus, you know, you can make some really great treats for the kids, you know, without the guilt.
Totally. Well, I also feel like homeowners tend to be caring more about aesthetics in the kitchen today. So, you know, these appliances, which have often been seen as bulky or just, you know, they're necessary, but they're starting to become more beautiful these days too. There are all these wonderful features on them that make them really gorgeous looking too.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, most of us shop with our eyes, and we can hear about the features and the form and the function. But ultimately, you know, appliances today are no longer those big shiny work boxes.
Right.
You're looking for, if you're investing in a 48-inch wide professional range, you're going to want something that's going to perform, but also something that's going to look beautiful. Appliances have gone from being these large shiny work boxes to being these beautiful focal points inside of your kitchen. And if you're investing in a large professional style range, not only do you want your stove to perform, but you want it to look gorgeous. So there's a couple of things. The Monogram Statement Series collection is where you can find the ranges. And this collection brings modern design elements in with the restaurant inspired aesthetic. And what you can expect is these beautiful solid brass accents. And then they have these beautiful backlit control knobs. And the cool thing about them is, one, for safety, you can tell that the burner's on, and we'll get more into safety in a bit, but you can actually customize the color of the lighting behind the knobs to whatever you want. And you can just control it with your phone. It's super simple, but it really can bring just this element of beauty and luxury into the kitchen for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's so cool to set mood lighting on your appliance and bring a little personality to the kitchen as well. Well, what else is really impressive to me regarding technology and that you tapped on a little bit is safety. So, you know, I, for one, being the horrible cook I am, I can't tell you how many times I've walked away from my stovetop top with the burner on, just completely forgot it was there. But now there are all these really cool tools in place to prevent things like that from happening.
So what's really great is these appliances today are capable of being connected to Wi-Fi. And Monogram has really, really great selection of appliances that offer the Wi-Fi connectivity. And basically what it does is it provides you with peace of mind. If you're leaving the house and you're going out to run errands and your oven's still on, the geofencing feature will give you a notification that your oven's still running. You can check that with your phone. And you can make modifications in real time to the function of your appliances from wherever you are. So that's really quite special. And furthermore, having appliances that are connected is actually really good to streamline the appliance service process as well. Hopefully you don't need to have a service technician, but in the event that you do, your appliance is really intelligent and can identify an issue and can even call for help when you need it.
But what else that we were talking about, you mentioned counter space being something that's on people's minds. So I'm amazed at seeing some appliances that we've seen the 3-in-1s, and now there are pieces that go to 5-in-1s. So you really only need one thing to outfit your cooking space.
So one of the biggest trends that we've seen coming out of the pandemic is people are carving out spaces in their home. The great thing about the Monogram 5-in-1 oven in particular is it can serve 5 functions in one oven. This oven is a microwave. It looks like a wall oven. It pulls down, but it can serve as a microwave. That gets rid of the microwave off the counter. Now, it can also toast. So no more toaster oven. Furthermore, it has a speed baking capacity with the Advantium technology. Essentially, it uses a combination of halogen lighting and microwaves to be able to expedite the cooking process. It's really excellent for reheating food. It's also really, really good for convenience foods, for reheating leftovers. You can even make a chicken in here. Plus, it has precision cooking. Essentially, the oven itself can adjust its temperature and duration depending on what's happening with the food, so that your food turns out perfect every time. And then the last functionality of it is it can act like a warmer or a proofer. So for folks that are really into making breads or even doing fruit leathers, things like that, it's really a powerful appliance. So yes, you should think about it for your kitchen, but also your guest suite, because it can do everything.
Totally. Why buy 5 different things when you can have one?
Exactly.
So, something that my husband and I love making every Friday night for dinner is pizza. We're like most families that way. And finally, brick ovens really are coming into homes.
The Monogram hearth oven is the best solution for in-home pizza making out there. So the great thing about it is it builds into your kitchen cabinetry. It's made so that you don't have to have from an installation perspective, it's super easy. You don't have to have any external ventilation. This oven is built to go into a cutout. It's super, super great for any kitchen. Now, the great thing about pizza in particular is it actually is really seamless. You look at the control panel, you pick out what type of pizza you want to make. They have everything from deep dish, Detroit style, Neapolitan, New York style, flatbreads, custom pizzas, whatever you would like to make. Wow. Your oven will take care of it for you.
You can open a pizza restaurant right in your kitchen, but it's not just for pizza lovers either, right? I'm sure you can cook all kinds of fun casseroles or, these classic fall dishes like sweet potatoes in there too. I'm sure those turn out great as well, right?
So good.
Yeah,
absolutely. They do have a whole menu of things that you can make that are not pizza. And I mean, my personal favorite, not on the menu, but this time of year, I'm actually thinking about those little cast iron pans where you can make individualized casseroles or desserts. I'm thinking apple crisp would be really delicious in this oven, but the oven itself comes with really popular preset modes such as roasted vegetables, roasted fruits, salmon, whitefish, and there's a whole menu. Make it seamless, or you could set your own temperature. It's super easy.
So if we want to learn more about these appliances we've been talking about, or we want to see them in person, where do we go?
So you can visit us online at ajmadison.com or stop into one of our 3 showrooms in Brooklyn, New York, in the greater DC metro area, and soon to be Sunny Isles, Florida.
Well, I think you're bringing the joy of cooking back into households like mine. Thank you so much, Jess. This was so much fun to talk.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
You too.